All right, so just like with the Raven Award nominations and with my best of, I have a PowerPoint presentation, very, very fancy stuff here. We never try to leave anything, uncovered here on OMB Reviews. We spend all the money that we can. And in this case, it was just some of my sanity to get these things together and to get them to work. So these are the worst films of 2022. So the caveat, as I mentioned earlier, that I always like to give, and the same always applies to my best of list, I did not see every film that came out in 2022. There are still a plethora of films that I have not seen, some that I've heard good things about, some things that I've heard terrible things about, but I have not seen everything, for one. Secondly, spared no expense. Exactly, Abomination. That was kind of like the expression I was looking for. We spare no expense here on OMB Reviews. So I don't get to see everything, for one. And then second, there are a lot of films that do come out that I do hear things about and that I might even have the chance to go see, but I choose not to watch it. And normally it's a film where it seems like it's just going to be so bad and so crappy that I just have no desire to put myself through that. That all being said, I still did see a lot of crappy movies in 2022, so let's go ahead and dive into our list here. So again, worst movies of 2022, and let's go ahead and start off with some dishonorable mentions. And so these are films that didn't make it onto my list, right? There were 10 movies specifically that I thought were the worst movies to come out in 2022 for a wide variety of reasons, but these are ones that were also not good. All right, so again, there's a lot of films I didn't see, but out of the films that I did see, these were the ones that I thought were really bad, but not bad enough to make it onto my top 10 list. And so the first one should come as no surprise to anyone, except for the fact that it's not on my official list. And so my first dishonorable mention is Avatar: The Way of Water. That's right, it should come to no surprise that I vehemently dislike this movie. The story is utter trash. People can try and spin in their heads all they want about, but the strong, father character, the strong, father narrative is there. And for me, I'm like, okay, but let's just go back to those first 10 minutes when you have a convoluted storyline coming out of thin air, right? You have the villain who died in the first film magically is back with something that happened off screen. And not only did that happen off screen, he also happened to have a child off screen too, who becomes one of the most annoying characters in the entire film as well. So basically everything is contrived together, just like with what we saw with the first film, right? He just decided to throw in a bunch of ideas from other better stories and other better franchises into this and put it all behind motion capture. And someone actually made a very good point about this in the comment section on one of the videos dealing with Avatar's box office of they feel bad for the kids. Or rather, they said that, for the kids, right, they're excited for them going forward. And I said, I actually kind of feel bad for them because other than the Avatar movies, what else could they possibly have going forward? Because if you think about it, no one's going to recognize them or know who they are from this point going forward. Because they're covered in this motion capture suit. And so unless you're someone who loves this enough to go and watch the special features, any other general audience member who even loved this movie, if they see those kids later on in other projects, they're going to say, I don't know who that is. I'm not going to care about who that is. So ultimately, though, the story is really what comes down to why I just cannot stand this movie. And it is easily one of the worst films of 2022, but it is a dishonorable mention. There are a plethora of other films that I thought were much, much worse than this, not only on an objective level, but also especially in my own subjective experience. Coming in at the next dishonorable mention is Glass Onion: A Knives Out Mystery. So this film got nominated got a lot of Raven nominations for its writing, and obviously the story on this one has been torn to shreds by people of any sound mind. The movie is incredibly just elitist snobbery, put to the very, put on blast. This is kind of what Rian Johnson is very well known for, right? This movie is just not good. The reason why this film didn't quite make it onto my top 10 list is because I actually did like some of the performances in the movie. That all being said, those performances were very few and far between, and ultimately they kind of got glossed over by the fact that the characters were so poorly written that the performances just kind of didn't even matter. So again, very, very bad film altogether, but ultimately not one of the worst films, not the top 10 worst films for me, but a bad film nonetheless. So again, all these movies are bad, right? All these movies are on my worst list, but these are the ones that just didn't quite make it into the top 10. Glass Onion, though, terrible, terrible film. And a lot of it is because of the pretentious nature of its story. Coming in at the next spot of my dishonorable mentions is Jackass Forever. So I am someone that grew up watching the original Jackass show, and I always thought it was hilarious. Even the movies, right? I actually thoroughly enjoyed most of the releases that they have done. The one that I didn't care much for was the Grandpa movie. For me, it was a little bit too much. And then for this one, I honestly just felt like they were trying a little bit too hard. And so even though there were definitely some gags, and I think there were definitely some skits that were funny, overall, I just didn't find them all that enjoyable. And so ultimately, this film felt very, very flat for me, was very underwhelming. So kind of getting to the comment that was made earlier, this was a movie that I actually had some high hopes for, and it ended up letting me down quite a bit. So Jackass Forever, one of my least favorite films of this year, and mostly because it was just a disappointment. Again, there were some good things on there. There were some fun moments, but ultimately it just didn't have that magic that you had in some of the other ones. Again, it felt very forced at times. All right, the next dishonorable mention is The Woman King, or another way to say it is the king, or rather the film that decides to completely destroy and distort history, all for the purposes of pushing some type of ideological agenda. And that happens from the very get-go with this movie. The very beginning of the film deals with, or rather, the beginning of The Woman King starts with a voiceover with text scrolling down the screen. And it tries to play up the fact that this tribe, right, of the Dahomey Kingdom, right, is a very dominant force. It tries to explain why they have conquered some of these other tribes and why these, battles are going on. And then over the course of the movie, they make it very clear that it's the white Europeans that are evil, and anything done by the Dahomey Kingdom is justified or even just downright good. And anything that is even critical of the Dahomey Kingdom, like the fact that they have slaves, right? At one point, the general, right, the female general, played by Viola Davis, mentions this very fact about why this is a bad thing. And guess what the blame is put on? The blame is put on not the previous rulers, not on the tribes, and not on the people, but it's put onto the Europeans. So it turns into a story about the Europeans trying to take over Africa, and then they gloss over the fact that they've enslaved their own people, and then they try to pretend as if slavery as a concept is somehow a Western one that did not exist in the country, in the continent, until the European settlers. It's just, again, rewriting history to an absurd degree, and the writing really is its downfall. There's really good acting in it, though. As much as Viola Davis is insufferable when it came to her promotion of this movie, she's a great actress. You know, I can separate art from the artist, and so I can still give her credit for giving a great performance in this movie, and there's a lot of other strong performances too, and that's the only reason why it didn't make it into the top 10 of the year, because everything else is just trash about that story. The next film is Uncharted. I won't speak very long about this one because it's a video game adaptation that ignored everything that was good about the video game, and I take that only because I didn't actually play the video game, but everyone who has immediately, even from casting, said, that isn't Nathan Drake. And then the film came out and people said, that's not Nathan Drake still. And the CGI especially is terrible. There's one sequence in particular where he's hopping from item to item that's falling out of a plane. And it's some of the fakest stuff I've ever seen in my life. The only thing that was missing was his spider suit. And that's the kind of like animation style and movement that was being seen. It was just awful. The next film on my dishonorable mention film is Black Adam movie. I just, again, did not like. When it comes to Pierce Brosnan, he was really the best part of the movie. He gave a great supporting performance, but he was just a supporting character. And there's a couple of supporting characters, I think, that did a good job. But there's also a couple of supporting characters, especially some of the kids in the film, that just were so bad. And then, of course, you had The Rock as Black Adam, who was just playing The Rock. And it's like, okay, why should I care about any of these things? Why should I care about any of these moments in the movie? So the thing that kept this off my top 10 list of worst films, though, is Pierce Brosnan. Got to give kudos to Pierce Brosnan because he did a great job with it. All right, and then my second to last dishonorable mention is a film that I know a bunch of you liked. I did not, and that film is Violent Night. I thought this film was atrocious. This film, it wasn't funny. Everything about the story was so on the nose and it was so incredibly predictable that it kept it from possibly ever being enjoyable. You know, there is that in-your-face humor. And again, I know a lot of people like this movie. There's that in your face humor that can exist, right? That in your face humor that can exist that can be funny. This to me just pushed it way too far. It didn't just push it in your face. It literally slammed it in your face and then rubbed your face in it and then stepped on the back of your head while you were doing it. I mean, when you got to the point where this little kid, not little kid, but he's like a teenager, is trying to do like Snapchat promotions or Instagram promotions, and he's supposed to be like an influencer. That's like the point of the film where I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like no, just stop. Just please go away. Just please stop. And then they decided, of course, to change the entire background of where Santa Claus comes from and turns it into something that's not even close to the fact that Santa Claus, by the way, for people who don't know, it's actually, Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, Saint Niklaus, actual person named Saint Nicholas. Obviously, not, the real Saint Nicholas was not, the person that we know as Santa Claus, but they decide to take it in a different direction and decide to give him a different origin story. And I just thought it was just a bit, again, on the nose and just downright stupid. So not a good film, in my humble opinion. And so it's a dishonorable mention. And the last of the dishonorable mentions is Death on the Nile. Talk about a movie that should have been better than what it was. You look at the casting, you look at the people involved with the project. And actually, the previous film was actually one of my big surprises of the year. I actually enjoyed the previous film in this franchise of Mr. Poirot. This new iteration of the character of Poirot. And I know that if Tina was around, she would probably have a lot of things to say about it. But this one, the acting was just not good. It just wasn't there. But what was even worse was the writing and the ending of the movie, especially with how things play out. I was rolling my eyes. The CGI, the effects that they use, way too much in the movie too. Just nothing really redeemable about the film, other than maybe a couple of people who are like decent and okay. But those are my dishonorable mentions for worst films of 2022, which leads into the official top 10 list. Let's go ahead and dive into it. And again, I am recording this live on the OMB. I am rather recording this live on the Welcome to Asgard podcast. So don't worry, I will get into your comments as soon as I finish this. But let's go ahead and dive into the top 10 worst films of 2022. Coming in at number 10, we have Halloween Ends. Yes, you knew this had to be somewhere on my list because I was so let down after Halloween Kills. And I still actually I dislike Halloween Kills a bit more than Halloween Ends. I just really didn't like anything about Halloween Kills. And the ending of Halloween Kills to me is just so poorly put together. It's hard for me to let that go. That being said, that doesn't make this film any much better, especially when you think about this film and contemplate this film and really just what it does. The fact that it's called Halloween Ends and it's supposed to be a film, right, featuring Michael Myers, and Michael Myers is only in the film for what? Am I being generous if I say 20% of the movie? He's in it for 20% of it. Is that generous? I think that's a pretty generous one, right? So 20% of the movie, he's in it. That does not make any sense. That is a terrible decision. From that moment alone, you're like, okay, this is stupid. But what I did like about the movie, and why it's a little bit lower on my list, is because the very beginning scene I thought was actually done very well. Very, very creepy, very spooky way to start it, right? The babysitter who kicks the door open ends up, killing this kid, and you're like, whoa, okay, we're getting started. Right? We're just, getting the ball rolling, and then everything from there just falls completely flat on its face. And then you lead to the ending, trying to put a pin into the entire thing with Michael Myers, and it's just, yeah. I'm glad it's ended. I'm glad that this is over, but is it going to be over? Are they going to be done with it? It's too hard to say at this point in time. But number 10, Halloween Ends. Coming in at the number 9 worst film of the year, Moonfall, a movie that most people didn't see. It's one of the biggest flops of 2022, and there's very good reason as to why that is the case. In fact, even now, trying to remember anything about the movie, I really can't give you much. All I know is that there's the really big guy who was friends with Jon Snow in Game of Thrones. He's in it. He plays a scientist who's trying to say that the moon is actually really a hollow structure that is being used by aliens, I think, if I remember correctly. I think that's what it was. Again, I've forgotten so much about the story because of how forgettable and how boring and how bland it actually was. Halle Berry, I think, was in the movie too. Let's just say this movie is incredibly forgettable, had a lot of money spent on visual effects that, for the most part, don't really pan out and don't really work all that well. But the story is so forgettable that I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the number 8 film. So the number 8 worst film of 2022 is Ambulance. This was a movie I had a lot of bad things to say when it came out. The worst thing about it is the cinematography. They thought they were being clever. They thought that they were going to be really clever with the way they were using shaky cam to make it seem like it was a lot more of a bumpy ride inside the ambulance when they have the ambulance chase sequences. They thought they were going to be clever by having these drone shots and these very incredible fast-moving drone images. And in the end, it created a cacophony of noise that probably would have made, and probably did make, a lot of people really sick. The cinematography on this movie is just completely garbage. And it's some of the worst cinematography that I've actually seen in a very, very long time. And this made me very sad because I was excited by the fact that Jake Gyllenhaal was in the movie. I'm a big fan of his. And even the performance that he gives in the film, which was okay, could not make up for the terrible cinematography, the really bad supporting characters, the really bad supporting actors in the film too, that didn't really help matters all that much. And so Ambulance easily is the number 8 film for me for worst films of 2022. Number 7 is Jurassic World Dominion. Jurassic World has been a pretty bad franchise from the get-go. The first Jurassic World, I was like, okay, they're trying something different. Then you had Fallen Kingdom come around, and you're like, oh boy, they're just jumping into stupid. And then this film came around, and it was like, oh, the stupid continues. And now you're actually bringing in people from the original Jurassic Park series to try to make it seem like it's better. And in the end, you just waste them. You waste their talent, you waste their potential, and give us just, again, one of these weird, I would imagine mostly studio-made, cookie-cutter, action, Jurassic, dinosaur chase movies that just does not work in really any capacity whatsoever, especially from a story standpoint. It picks up from where the last film left off, and it, again, goes even further with its stupidity. The bad guy in the movie, by the way, the bad guy in the movie is Steve Jobs. And no, like the bad guy in the movie is Steve Jobs, or actually it's a combination of Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, right? So the former and current head of Apple. That's how the guy looks and how the guy presents himself. And then the big bad in the movie is not even just the dinosaurs, it's giant locusts. It's locusts that have been genetically modified from Jurassic material. Yes, that's what they decided to give us. Jurassic locust. And that's pretty much all there is to say about that. Terrible, terrible movie. And again, goes to show you that just because Chris Pratt's in a movie doesn't mean, 1, that it's going to be good, or 2, that it's worth going to see. And the fact that this film just made $1 billion makes me very, very sad. Coming in at number 6, we have Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. And it says it's actually misspelled, and I don't care because the movie was so bad that having that misspelling there makes actually perfect sense to me. This movie, I honestly believe, only exists to justify tweets that were made by J.K. Rowling years ago when she said, well, actually, Dumbledore's gay. Because what is the secret of Dumbledore? Oh, it's that he had a romantic relationship with Grindelwald. So not only do you have the Johnny Depp stuff, right, where they kick him out because of Amber Heard, which, again, because of the court case we all know is, we know how crazy she actually really is is really the bad guy in that relationship. I don't think either of them are good, but again, who is worse? I think Amber Heard clearly lost that battle, lost that PR battle and court battle, by the way. But you have that going on. Honestly, I didn't hate the recasting of Grindelwald because I do like the actor that they got to play his character. But again, the whole movie exists to justify the change that was made just haphazardly by J.K. Rowling that all along Dumbledore's actually been gay. And this film exists to be able to justify it, and then just doesn't really do much else. I remember there was something with a creature that bowed before the person that is supposed to be the new head minister of magic, or supposed to be the new head of something. And I was like, this is so convoluted. How does this make any sense? And then you, of course, have all the other supporting characters that, for the most part, are doing most of nothing. So number 6 worst film of all, or rather, number 6 worst film of 2022 easily goes to Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. Let's hope that this is the last one. Let's really hope this is the last one, because it's just gotten to the point where they need to stop. Please get help. You need to stop, as the meme goes. All right, now we're getting into the top 5. So these are my top 5 worst films of 2022. Coming in at number 5 is Morbius. Okay, I love the Morbius memes. It's Morbin time is hilarious and fantastic. But even with all of that, right, even though I think that this film will eventually develop some type of like cult following as being one of like the best worst movies ever, and people are going to like create new fan editions and cuts or something, right, where people are just going to have fun with how bad the movie is, doesn't change the fact that the movie is really, really bad. All right. I mean, easily one of the worst films that was made this past year, whether it's the CGI, whether it's the acting, or whether it's just, again, the very stupid, convoluted story that just does not work, especially on a screen level. All you're left with then are the memes. And the memes are great. The memes are fantastic. All right. But the movie is not. It's boring. It drags along. And again, features really bad CGI. And ultimately, it continues to prove that Jared Leto is not a leading person. He is not a leading character. He is not a leading man. And I don't know why they have not figured that part out yet. But until they do, I think you're going to continue to see Jared Leto be put in roles that are just not going to make money at the box office. It would be hilarious if Morbius gets like a actual full-fledged sequel to the point of them actually trying, and actually we see a redemption arc take place. That would be fun. But yeah, number 5 worst film of the year easily is Morbius. It's Morbin time. But there are 4 other films that I thought were actually worse, and you'll see a theme, I think, in many of them. Coming in at the number 4th worst film of 2022, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. That's right. When you have a movie continuing to feature subpar CGI from the MCU. The MCU is just known these days for having bad CGI. Adding to that the fact that you have a force field surrounding your kingdom that can be opened by drumming on water. And then also behind the drums of water, you have what looks to be like a disc station, like a disc jockey, a DJ station. And then you have villains that are just basically convoluted and conjured up together, right? Loosely, very, very loosely based off of the original comic characters and comic group. You compare, according to people who are actually knowledgeable of the source material. When you have that going on, you have then also your lead villain as Namor. Not even just Namor, but Namor. And you have the Namor character, and he's got his little wings on his feet, right? And he is established as being the first mutant, even though that's not really apparently what he's supposed to be known for. And then you have, oh wait, what kills him? How do we defeat him? How do we possibly defeat this unstoppable force and mutant? Oh, let's just get a bunch of blow dryers and dry him out. Amongst many other problems, like them being able to break into Wakanda and so many other things. It's just a giant mess of a movie, and yeah, poor Chadwick Boseman legacy, right, is just, I think, tarnished by this movie. They don't really offer him any type of respect. They don't really offer him any good send-off in any way, I think. And yes, and sadly, this is what we're left with. This is the future of the MCU, right? The MCU, as we constantly see mentioned by Gary from Nerdrotic, but he's just so right and so on the nose with it, and now it's becoming even that much more prominent, especially with the other films that are on this list. So coming in at the number 3 spot then, no one's surprised here, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That's right, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Dr. Wanda, as some have called it, because ultimately this film is not a Doctor Strange movie. It is a movie that exists solely to prop up 2 female characters. You have, of course, the villain in Scarlet Witch, who we continue to also see their writing. Again, this is how abysmal their writing is for Marvel in general. They, in the series of WandaVision, have her imprison an entire town, including children, psychological torture, to say the very least. And then they end it as if she should be justified in her choice, as if they're just going to be like, okay, you did something bad, we're just going to let you go. And then she continues on in this as the bad person, as the bad guy. And then all of a sudden you realize, no, actually, even within the story that they're telling, and even though she's doing all these terrible things, they're still trying to make her out to be understandable. They're still trying to justify in some weird, twisted way the actions that she is doing. So it exists to prop her up. And then, of course, it also exists to prop up America Chavez, who's the actual protagonist in the movie. Who is that? Great question. I only know from what this movie tells me. And she is the daughter of two moms. So I'm sure that is probably a big part of why they decide to have her be a big part of this movie. And her power is that she can make a star shape that allows her to jump between different universes. Ergo, you get the multiverse. And whereas a film like Everything Ever All at Once is a very fun multiverse movie, this film is not. It's a giant mess. They could have done so much more, and in the end, they completely miss out. So that's my number 3 worst film of 2022. And that leaves the number 2 movie. So these are my top 2 worst films of 2022. Yeah, you're probably like, wait, what is number 1 going to be? Because you have probably a good idea of what number 2 is going to be, and you would be correct. That's right, Thor: Love and Thunder. Yes, a complete waste of the talents of so many actors, and ultimately one of the worst treatments of the character of Thor that we have ever seen, right? Whether it's his bromance with Star-Lord, whether it is his relationship with Mjolnir, whether it is the fact that they decide to bring in female Thor. Don't call her female Thor, she's Mighty Thor. No, she's Jane Foster, who happens to some reason be able to grab Mjolnir and get the power of Thor, even though she's not actually Thor. And it happens in such a way and is explained in such a way that just leaves one who doesn't have any comics experience scratching their head saying, well, that just seems convoluted put together last minute. In addition to that, you have a film that features so much so-called comedy from Taika Waititi, who, as I mentioned previously, I actually enjoy his earlier work. The problem is that he got so big so very quickly, especially with a film like Ragnarok, that I think he has kind of lost the forest for the trees. And so much so, in fact, that even people like Jeremy Jahns have said this is one of the worst films to come out this year because it took all of the fun that some, Marvel films sometimes have in them, and then decided to put it on crack, and then took that child on crack, and then decided to take that child on crack, and then also put heroin in them, and then in addition to that, allow them to raise themselves, and again, be raised by wolves over a period of 10 to 20 years, and then that is what gives us this movie. And yes, that convoluted explanation I just gave explains, actually, it's probably a better story, in fact, than what we get from Thor: Love and Thunder. And again, it was bad. It was really, really bad. Coming in, though, at my number 1 worst film of the year, and I guarantee you, I would be surprised if even one person has seen this movie. As I said, I don't see all the movies that come out, but there are sometimes movies, and I try to avoid bad movies, but sometimes there's a movie that comes out where I say, wait a minute, this exists? I kind of need to check this out. And that's what happened with this one, and I regretted every single second of it, and it was really, really, really bad. And the number 1 worst film of 2022, again, you're not going to see this one coming, 13 the Musical. Yes, you're wondering, what in the world is this? I've never heard of this. And why would you watch this? Well, let me take you back in time a little bit. So when I was living in New York, I saw a lot of Broadway shows. Big fan of theater, been a big fan of theater for a very long time. And there was a show that got released on Broadway called 13 the Musical. Actually featured a young Ariana Grande before she went off to become a crazy pop star, doing crazy things and getting surgeries on her face and just, again, really falling off the wagon in a lot of ways, I would say. She was a great singer. She actually had a lot of prospects to become a future Broadway star and unfortunately threw those away just so that she could become a pop star. And it just is kind of sad and disturbing. So she was in this musical, and the musical actually was really, really fun. It's the story about a boy who happens to be Jewish, who is in the process of planning for a party for his bar mitzvah, and all of a sudden his life gets turned upside down because his parents separate, and instead of being in this big city in New York City, right, planning all this event with all of his friends, he has to move all the way to, Indiana? A small town in Indiana somewhere, where he has to start over. Now, again, the musical was actually quite fun. This one took all of the fun that was in that musical, decided to add in a bunch of random characters and change the story in just enough ways that it was very clear that their attempt was to be as inclusive of a film as possible, to the point of changing key and core elements of the story, including changing a key character who was supposed to be someone who had, again, a physiological illness, physical illness where they had to use crutches in order to be able to, and instead put him in a wheelchair and decide to change it so much so that anything that existed, the soul of the actual story itself, clearly went out the window. This film featured, I think, Josh Peck from Drake and Josh. I think he was in the movie at some point randomly. There's a bunch of other random people in the film, and let me just say it this way, it's not good. In fact, if you were to look at it, if you were to come across this on Netflix, and you would be looking at the trailer for this one or anything, you'd be like, what in the world? I'm not going to watch this crap. And you shouldn't. Easily the worst film of 2022. And again, I've not seen everything, but all the films that I have seen, this is by far the worst, and these are the top 10 worst films, and all of the all of the dishonorable mentions as well. So anyway, for those watching live, thank you very much for bearing with me, but I'm going to go ahead and put a sign off in here. Don't worry, we will continue the live show, but just so that way we can put a nip in this as a video. So again, if you're watching this after the fact, what are y'all's thoughts? What were your worst films of 2022? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, like the fire button. Honestly, you're all amazing and beautiful people. All have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.
And now for a huge shout out to all of my January Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above. Starting off with my Patreon members, Father Luca Illich, Garrett Searles, Jaimir Ari Hymason, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, who you can check out on his YouTube channel, Orange Chat Reviews, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Eagle Writer, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel, Miss Martin Muses, and of course the amazing Empress of the Universe, Tina B, who you can check out over on her YouTube channel, Tina B, with her show Soup to Nuts, which she does, tries to do every single week with her friend and with fellow Valkyrie and fellow mod of the channel, Stephanie B.
And also a special shout out to the Modern Major General of the channel, Laura Story. Thank you again for joining.
And of course, I do want to give a special shout out to Tina B and make sure that everyone knows that our prayers are being extended towards her as she continues to recover from complications that have occurred recently with her medically and has resulted in a loss of eyesight, or at the very least of more clear eyesight. So to continue to offer our prayers for her. Also a shout out to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, who can check out on his Twitch channel by the same name, The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and the K-Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. So thank you all very much for supporting me on Local, Subscribe Star, and Patreon. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, please check out the top link in the video description below, where you get access to this, and also, of course, to a monthly podcast that I do with John the Flick Flickinger. Also access to a giveaways channel on my Discord, where I give away films. This month I've got films like Seven Samurai on Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection to give away, The Banshees of Inisherin, Tommy Boy Steelbook, Edge of Tomorrow 4K, and tons of other 4Ks and Steelbooks as they get released over the next month will be available, and also, of course, digital codes as well. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out that top link and join over on Patreon, Subscribe Star, or on Locals. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.